Good day to you. Joshua here. If you're not back with us, we miss you. I know I say that every time, but I do. I miss you. And if you are back with us and you decided to listen to this, thank you for listening. We're going to be in Ephesians chapter 6 today. So go with me. This lesson, we're going to be in Ephesians chapter 6. Specifically, we're going to be looking at verses 10 all the way down to verse 20. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 20. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and, as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit, with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints, and also for me, that words may be given to me, and opening my mouth boldly to proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly, as I ought to speak. So, this is a very familiar passage. Ephesians chapter 6, the whole armor, the armor of God. And I have heard, most of us have heard dozens of little devotionals, of lessons, of sermons on the whole armor of God. So most of us, or most of the people watching this video, could tell me all of the pieces of armor that we have. Where we have the breastplate and helmet and shield and belt and shoes and sword. Most of you could tell me all of those things. I remember being in high school and being in Last Leaders. One of the speeches that I gave was about the whole armor of God. In high school, I played football, and I remember making a parallel between all of my football equipment, the stuff that I wore, and the whole armor of God. And looking back on it, for me, it's not a very good parallel. I was doing it wrong. When I think of all of my equipment that I put on with football, I put on my cleats and my pants and my pads in my pants, and I had a belt on, and I usually had an undershirt and then pads and then a jersey and then a helmet and then a mouthpiece. And I think about all of those things that I had on, and all of those, when playing football, those are for my protection. They were solely defending my body from anything and everything that came my way. And I think about the whole armor of God and how in the armor of God, there are defensive and offensive and some utility pieces, some pieces that just help us. So let's start off with the defensive pieces. The first piece that I want to look at in verse 14 is the breastplate of righteousness. Now, think about back in this time. A Roman soldier would have had sandals, and he would have had like a kilt, skirt type thing that he wore, and then a belt, and then a shirt, and then a breastplate, and in his hands he'd have a shield and a sword and a helmet. So the breastplate of righteousness. I think of the word righteousness, and it means to be right, to be whole, to be pure. And I think about how a breastplate would cover a person's torso. The most important organs are here. And that's what it would protect. And knowing that I'm right with God, knowing that I've been made righteous, that covers the big stuff. That covers the most important things in my life. Going on after that, I think of the helmet. Verse 17, and take the helmet of salvation. Righteousness and salvation are very similar, but salvation is different in the fact that salvation means to be delivered or deliverance. And I think of how a soldier in battle, you had this part, which was very important, and then your head. Your head is very important. And I could imagine a lot of soldiers saying that the fact that they had their helmet on, it delivered them through battle. It delivered them in their fighting. And I think about us and having our salvation and our deliverance and how that gets us through the battle of life. After that, I think of the shield. And the shield is, usually Roman soldiers would either have a wooden shield or it would be very tall, like a rectangle, and go almost all the way to the ground. And I think about how, people would use their shields defensively, sometimes offensively, but mostly defensively. And I think of the word faith. And faith is believing in the things that we do not see. So our faith, the thing that protects us, the thing that we can move around. Verse 16, in all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. So I'm imagining holding a circular shield and someone is shooting darts at me, and I'm sitting here and I'm dodging them and I'm letting them catch in my shield. And that's what our faith is, believing in things that we do not see. It's the wall that's built between us and Satan trying to get in, Satan trying to harm us. Now let's go to some of the utility pieces. The first one I want to look at is the belt. Verse 14, stand therefore having fastened on the belt of truth. What does that mean? The belt of truth. I don't know if I've never worn a skirt or kilt, but that's what they wore. And I can imagine being in battle, you're moving around and running around and maybe squatting and coming up. And I think about a belt for a kilt and how that is a very important piece of equipment. And I think of how it stands for truth in the Bible. And I think of the phrase, you ever been caught with your pants down? In battle against Satan, if we're not true with ourselves and true with God and true with other people, we sometimes get caught with our pants down. And for a warrior in battle, it's never a good thing to be caught with your pants down, because you're trying to fight off and do things and your pants are falling, and you're not as good of a warrior as you could be because you're distracted with the fact that your kilt or skirt is always falling down and you're having to pull up. So your belt of truth and being true to yourself and to other people and to God is very important. The next utility piece that I think of, the shoes. Verse 15, and as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. For me, as a 21st century American, and I've never had to go without shoes. Actually, I have several different pairs of shoes. I have my good tennis shoes, and then I have my workout tennis shoes, and I have my brown loafers, and then my brown dress shoes, and my black dress shoes, and my flip-flops, and my Crocs, and my boots. I have all types of different shoes for different things. I wouldn't wear my flip-flops to go hunting in the middle of December. I wouldn't wear my boots to go swimming in. And I think of how important shoes are to a warrior. Because if you have shoes and the straps are loose and you're sitting here fighting and your shoe comes off or it's half come off, well, now you're walking around on the rocks and you're distracted by that and it slows you down. And I think it's interesting that the shoes stand for the readiness given by the gospel of peace. I think about how sometimes as a Christian, I don't feel ready. I don't feel prepared. I don't feel prepared for, number one, what Satan is bringing to me. And I don't feel prepared about taking God to someone else with Bible studies or conversations. It's because I don't have the right shoes on. It's because I don't, or at least the shoes that I have on aren't very good ones, because I'm not ready. The last piece of equipment that I want to look at is the sword. Verse 17. And the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. It's interesting. There are 6 pieces. There are 6 pieces of armor here. And only one offensive piece of armor. Only one thing that we can do any damage with. And I think of how important it is that we know how to use our sword. If you listen to the thought last week, I talked about how important it is to know how to use our sword. Because if we don't, we can hurt ourselves, we can hurt other people. We're sometimes careless with it, just swinging it around in people's lives. We must know how to use our sword. And I think about all of these different pieces of armor that we have on. And I find myself, and I think us in the church, we find ourselves emphasizing certain pieces more than others. Like I want to emphasize the sword, and I want to emphasize the shield. And if you ask any warrior which piece is more important than the others, I'm sure that they would tell you that every piece is important. Without the belt of truth, your kilt and your skirt is falling down and you're getting caught with your pants down in the middle of a battle without the right shoes on. You're slowed down and the enemy can get behind you and hit you from a different way. All of these are important. So my first question is, do you have all the pieces? Are you fully equipped in the armor of God? Or are you missing one? Are you missing the breastplate of righteousness? Are you missing the sword? Are you missing the shoes that have us, that helps us be ready? Are you missing any of that? And number 2, some of us might have everything in our arsenal. We might have every single piece of equipment that there is to have. But is there any that's maybe tarnished or got rusty? Maybe some of the leather straps from the shoes have rotted a little bit or have some cuts in them and they're not strong. So, my challenge for us this week is to look at ourselves, to look through these pieces of armor that God gives us. And we ask ourselves, number 1, do I have every piece of armor? And number 2, if I do have every piece, are there some pieces that are weaker than others. I think about the shoes a lot because I feel very unready sometimes. Unready in what Satan throws at me, or unready in talking to other people about Jesus, and how it slows me down in my walk with God. How I feel like I'm trudging through instead of sprinting through. Maybe if I had some better shoes, I would do better at that. So, look over this list this week and evaluate yourself. And ask yourself, as I'm going to ask myself, where is my armor? What condition is my armor in? I thank you for listening today, and I thank you for always putting God first. Have a great day.